£60,000 for it, but after years of disappointment he was content to sell it to Cardinal de Rohan for £64,000, to be liquidated in 3 instalments, not one of which was ever paid. This latter amount was probably somewhere near the value of the 516 separate stones, one of which was of tremendous size, a very monarch of diamonds, holding its court among 17 brilliants, each as large as a filbert. This iridescent concentration of wealth was, as one might say, placed in my care, and I had to see to it that no harm came to the necklace or to its prospective owner until they were safely across the boundaries of France. The 4 weeks previous to the 13th proved a busy and anxious time for me. Thousands, most of whom were actuated by mere curiosity, wished to view the diamonds. We were compelled to discriminate, and sometimes discriminated against the wrong person, which caused unpleasantness. 3 distinct attempts were made to rob the safe, but luckily these criminal efforts were frustrated, and so we came unscathed to the eventful 13th of the month. The sale was to begin at 2 o'clock, and on the morning of that day I took the somewhat tyrannical precaution of having the more dangerous of our own malefactors, and as many of the foreign thieves as I could trump up charges against, laid by the heels. Yet I knew very well it was not these rascals I had most to fear, but the suave, well-groomed gentlemen, amply supplied with unimpeachable credentials, stopping at our fine hotels and living like princes. Many of these were foreigners against whom we could prove nothing, and whose arrest might land us into temporary international difficulties. Nevertheless, I had each of them shadowed, and on the morning of the 13th, if one of them had even disputed a cab fare, I should have had him in prison half an hour later and taken the consequences. But these gentlemen are very shrewd, and do not commit mistakes. I made up a list of all the men in the world who were able or likely to purchase the necklace. Many of them would not be present in person at the auction rooms. Their bidding would be done by agents. This simplified matters a good deal, for the agents kept me duly informed of their purposes, and besides, an agent who handles treasure every week is an adept at the business, and does not need the protection which must surround an amateur, who in 9 cases out of 10 has but scant idea of the dangers that threaten him, beyond knowing that if he goes down a dark street in a dangerous quarter he is likely to be maltreated and robbed. There were no less than 16 clients, all told, whom we learned were to attend personally on the day of the sale, any one of whom might well have made the purchase. The Marquis of Warlingham and Lord Oxted from England were well-known jewel fanciers, while at least half a dozen millionaires were expected from the United States, with a smattering from Germany, Austria, and Russia, and one each from Italy, Belgium, and Holland. Admission to the auction rooms was allowed by ticket only, to be applied for at least a week in advance, applications to be accompanied by satisfactory testimonials. It would possibly have surprised many of the rich men collected there to know that they sat cheek by jowl with some of the most noted thieves of England and America, but I allowed this for 2 reasons. First, I wished to keep these sharpers under my own eye until I knew who had bought the necklace, and secondly, I was desirous that they should not know they were suspected. I stationed trusty men outside on the Boulevard des Italiens, each of whom knew by sight most of the probable purchasers of the necklace. It was arranged that when the sale was over I should walk out to the boulevard alongside the man who was the new owner of the diamonds, and from that moment until he quitted France my men were not to lose sight of him if he took personal custody of the stones, instead of doing the sensible and proper thing of having them insured and forwarded to his residence by some responsible transit company, or depositing them in the bank. In fact, I took every precaution that occurred to me. All police Paris was on the qui vive, and felt itself pitted against the scoundrelism of the world. For one reason or another, it was nearly 2:30 before the sale began. There had been considerable delay because of forged tickets, and indeed each order for admittance was so closely scrutinised that this in itself took a good deal more time than we anticipated. Every chair was occupied, and still a number of the visitors were compelled to stand. I stationed myself by the swinging doors at the entrance end of the hall, where I could command a view of the entire assemblage. Some of my men were placed with backs against the wall, whilst others were distributed amongst the chairs, all in plain clothes. During the sale, the diamonds themselves were not displayed, but the box containing them rested in front of the auctioneer, and 3 policemen in uniform stood guard on either side. Very quietly the auctioneer began by saying that there was no need for him to expatiate on the notable character of the treasure he was privileged to offer for sale, and with this preliminary he requested those present to bid. Someone offered 20,000 francs, which was received with much laughter. Then the bidding went steadily on until it reached 900,000 francs, which I knew to be less than half the reserve the government had placed upon the necklace. The contest advanced more slowly until the 1.5 million was touched, and there it hung fire for a time, while the auctioneer remarked that this sum did not equal that which the maker of the necklace had been finally forced to accept for it. After another pause he added that, as the reserve was not exceeded, the necklace would be withdrawn, and probably never again offered for sale. He therefore urged those who were holding back to make their bids now. At this the contest livened until the sum of 2,300,000 francs had been offered, and now I knew the necklace would be sold. Nearing the 3 million mark, the competition thinned down to a few dealers from Hamburg and the Marquis of Walsingham from England, when a voice that had not yet been heard in the auction room was lifted in a tone of some impatience. $1 million. There was an instant hush, followed by the scribbling of pencils, as each person present reduced the sum to its equivalent in his own currency, pounds for the English, francs for the French, marks for the German, and so on. The aggressive tone and the clear-cut face of the bidder proclaimed him an American, not less than the financial denomination he had used. In a moment it was realised that his bid was a clear leap of more than 2 million francs, and a sigh went up from the audience as if this settled it and the great sale was done. Nevertheless, the auctioneer's hammer hovered over the lid of his desk, and he looked up and down the long line of faces turned towards him. He seemed reluctant to tap the board, but no one ventured to compete against this tremendous sum, and with a sharp click the mallet fell. "What name?" he asked, bending over towards the customer. "Cash," replied the American. "Here's a cheque for the amount. I'll take the diamonds with me." "Your request is somewhat unusual," protested the auctioneer mildly. "I know what you mean," interrupted the American. "You think the cheque may not be cashed. You will notice it is drawn on the Crédit Lyonnais, which is practically next door. I must have the jewels with me. Send round your messenger with the cheque. It will take only a few minutes to find out whether or not the money is there to meet it. The necklace is mine, and I insist on having it." The auctioneer, with some demur, handed the cheque to the representative of the French Government who was present, and this official himself went to the bank. There were some other things to be sold, and the auctioneer endeavoured to go on through the list, but no one paid the slightest attention to him. Meanwhile, I was studying the countenance of the man who had made the astounding bid, when I should instead have adjusted my preparations to meet the new conditions now confronting me. Here was a man about whom we knew nothing whatever. I had come to the instant conclusion that he was a prince of criminals, and that a sinister design, not at that moment fathomed by me, was on foot to get possession of the jewels. The hand